Okay, Assalamualaikum. So today we proceed with the population proportion for cluster sampling. Okay, so as you know from the previous lesson, you know how to draw the cluster sampling, and then a little bit about the advantage of the cluster sampling rather than the other sampling technique, and also you know about the notation. Okay, when we are using the cluster sampling, which is such as um, the element, the cluster, the number of cluster, the number of element, dan juga variable of interest. Okay, so as usual, you know how to find to estimate the mean and total before this. Okay, another one adalah when we want to estimate the proportion of the population. Okay, so as you know, sebelum ni, from the previous lesson that you have learned, is equal with the other sampling like SRS, systematic dan juga stratified, that we know that the proportion adalah the fraction. Okay, it comes from the binomial distribution, which is the outcome. We have only two outcome, which is success and failure. Betul tak? Okay, it depends on our variable of interest ataupun characteristic of interest. Okay, that is the proportion. Contohnya dekat sini, proportion of the houses in a state with inadequate plumbing. Okay, so maksudnya kat sini ada only two outcome. We have two outcome, sama ada inadequate plumbing or adequate plumbing, ataupun the proportion of the corporation president who are college graduates or not college graduate. Ada dua outcome, ada dua result. So because of that, we find the proportion ataupun the fraction. Kadang-kadang kita gunakan percentage pun adalah proportion, kan? Alright, so the best estimator of the population proportion, notationnya adalah P is the sample proportion P hat. So we estimate the proportion using the sample proportion P hat. Okay, let's say AI denote the total number of element in cluster. So now we deal with the cluster sampling technique. That we know that we divided the population into a small group dipanggil cluster. Okay, so dikata the total number of element in cluster that possess the characteristic of interest is denoted as A. Okay, denoted as A, which is the total number of success lah. Kalau yang A tu, ataupun that possess the characteristic of interest, apa yang kita nak kaji lah, kan? Okay, then the proportion of the element in the sample of small n clusters, okay, sample possessing the characteristic is given by, okay, the formula nak estimate the sample of the proportion is summation of AI. Okay, summation of AI divided dengan summation of MI. So A ni adalah total number of element in cluster that possess the characteristic of interest. Okay, total number of element. Okay, berapa banyak elemen. Macam tadi, contoh tadi adalah yang ada with houses that with inadequate plumbing. So maksudnya A ni adalah total number of houses with inadequate plumbing. Itu kita punya interest. Kita punya successnya adalah inadequate plumbing. Okay, kita punya interest, characteristic of interest. So kita kena kira total number of houses with inadequate plumbing. Dia ada dua, sama ada inadequate plumbing ataupun adequate plumbing. So yang kita nak kat sini, our characteristic of interest adalah in houses with inadequate plumbing. So A tu adalah total number of element, total number of houses with inadequate plumbing untuk setiap kluster. Untuk setiap kluster you akan ada nilai A. Okay, so untuk nak kira, nak estimate the proportion for this cluster, okay, kena totalkan A untuk setiap cluster. Divide dengan summation of MI. MI adalah number of element lah untuk setiap cluster. Okay, tengok kat sini kata note that P hat has the same form as Y bar actually. Y bar macam nak kira Y bar sebelum ni? Ni. Summation of YI divide dengan summation of MI kan. Small n here. Y dekat sini adalah total number of observation. Kan total. Contohnya kita punya characteristic of interest, variable kita sebelum ni adalah income. So Y adalah total of income. Total of income for the household in each cluster. Okay, kalau dalam first cluster pertama ada 5 household, so kena totalkan dulu income untuk first cluster baru you akan dapat Y. Sama juga dekat sini, A ni actually adalah total of characteristic of interest, total of element. Disebabkan sekarang ni kita deal dengan proportion, kan, binomial distribution, dia punya outcome adalah yes or no saja. So A dekat sini ni Y dia sebenarnya adalah sama ada 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. So A ni kita kira bilangan dia saja. Contohnya kita tengok bawah nanti. We look here lah. Contohnya baca dulu sikit. Okay, the resident of the sample survey in the previous example sebelum ni are asked whether they rent or own. Rent or own. So ada 2 outcome saja, 0 or 1. The results are given in the table 8.2. Estimate the proportion of the resident who live in rented house. So maksudnya kita punya success adalah rented house. Rented housing. Number of resident who live in rented housing. So kita punya success adalah rented resident who live in rented housing. So kita punya outcome sebenarnya ada 2, rent or own. So sekarang ni rent akan jadi 1, own akan jadi 0. Sebab kita punya characteristic of interest adalah resident who live in rented housing. Okay. Okay, ini contohnya kat sini. Cluster, we have 25 cluster here. Small n will be 25. And then the resident, number of resident adalah number of element kita, Mi. So first cluster ada 8 resident. Second cluster ada 12 resident altogether. Okay, the third column here adalah renters. Maksudnya resident yang rent the house. So out of 8 resident, 4 orang yang rent the house, 4 orang lagi own the house. So di sini adalah total of resident who rent the house out of 8 resident. Dipanggil dia letak notation as A. Okay, kalau sebelum ni Y sebab kita totalkan kita punya observation, kan? Sebabkan sekarang ni kita deal dengan two outcome, binomial situation. So kita notationnya sebab dengan I lah, dengan A. Okay, actually sama saja. Alright. So this is a formula untuk dapatkan proportion. Okay, as usual, in order to find the bound on the error of estimation, B, we need the variance of proportion. Okay, B adalah 2 multiply the standard deviation, which is the square root of variance proportion. So now because of kita cari proportion, so di sini kita nak cari bound on the error of estimation for proportion. So sebab tu kat sini variance of proportion. Okay, so it is 1 minus small n divided by capital N. Okay, remember capital N here adalah total number of cluster that we have. Okay, S square P divided dengan small n multiply capital M bar square. Okay, this is a formula untuk dapatkan S square P, AI minus P hat here yang kita dapat kat sini multiply dengan MI square. Total dapatkan difference dulu, baru square, baru you total up. Divide dengan small n minus 1. Okay, and then di sini kalau sama juga dekat macam sebelum ni, if we do not know capital M, kita tak ada value capital M, maksudnya kita tak tahu how many resident altogether in that city, so we can estimate capital M bar with a small m bar, which is summation of mi n divide dengan small n. Okay. Okay, let's see this example. Okay, we want to estimate the proportion of the resident who live in the rented housing. This is the data tadi. Okay, and then we need this column. Okay, we need this column untuk nak cari S square. Okay, so how to get this? 4 minus dengan P hat multiply dengan this MI8. Okay, so we see how to find the P hat first. It is the summation of AI, which is we total up this column, dapat 70, to divide dengan total up this column, dapat 151. So P hat adalah 0.48. Value apa dia sebenarnya ni 0.48? Ini adalah fraction, dipanggil juga adalah fraction. So we can say that kita punya characteristic of interest tadi adalah resident who live in rented housing. We can say that 48% of the resident live in the rented housing. Okay, that is the proportion, kan? Okay. Okay, so in order to find the bound, we need this as square P. Alright, dan juga capital M bar square, because of we do not know the value of capital M, ataupun we cannot know the total number of residents, so we can estimate using this formula. Alright, so in order to find the S square P, we need this column dulu, kena square kan dulu actually, kan, summation kan dia, so you akan dapat that part, you akan dapat this part, kena bahagi dengan n minus 1. Kalau kat sini ni, dia terus ambil sebab dia dah calculate sebelum ni here. Okay, kalau nak buat manually, kena calculate satu-satu. Okay, alright. How we get 415 here? Ini daripada previous example, saying that the total number of cluster adalah 415. Okay, daripada example 8.2. Okay, you can see the example 8.2. So we got the variance of the proportion is 0.00054. So in order to find the bound, this is the bound. Okay, so the bound will be 2 multiply square root of 0.00054. Dapat nilai bound, which is 0.05. And we also can find the 95% confidence interval for proportion by P hat plus minus bound. Okay, ni bound kan, 2 multiply square root of the variance of proportion. Okay, untuk 95% probability, 95% confidence interval. So boundnya adalah 0.05, so we can say that the error of estimation should be less than 0.05. Okay, so this is how you calculate the proportion for cluster sampling technique. Okay, next we move to the selecting the sample size for estimating the proportion. sample size kat sini, remember for cluster kita nak cari sample size, maksudnya kita nak cari number of selected cluster. Okay, so this is the formula. Okay, we need capital N, we need sigma square P. So we can estimate sigma square P using S square P using this formula. And then dia punya D adalah B square multiply capital M bar square divided by 4. Okay, once again, if we cannot know the value of capital M bar, we can estimate it using small m. Small m. Okay, sorry, kita tak boleh tulis macam ni. Estimate capital M bar. You can estimate using small m bar. Okay, let's see the example. A new study will conducted in the same city for the purpose of estimating the proportion. Okay, so nak cari sample size, kita tengok dulu. Kita punya interest, we want to estimate what? Estimate mean ke, total ataupun the proportion. Barulah kita boleh tahu which formula of sample size that we need to use. How large a sample should be taken to estimate the proportion who rent their house with a bound of 0.04. So, ni adalah nilai D, bound, right? So, using the same value of S square tadi, dah ada tadi, kita estimate kan using, we estimate sigma square P using S square P. So, the value is 0.527. And we also estimate the capital M bar using the small m bar. Small m bar. So we can estimate the D. We can calculate the D is 0.0146 and apply the formula. So you akan dapat 3.2. Okay, untuk sample size. Untuk sample size, kita ambil, kita kena approximate lah sebab number of cluster tak ada dalam perpuluhan kan. So kita kena estimate 1 bigger. So 33.2. So kita ambil ke arah yang besar lah, 34 cluster. Ni untuk number of sample size saja, untuk number untuk nak cari small n saja. Okay, untuk nak cari small n saja yang kita bundar menjadi kita bundarkan ke arah yang besar lah. Kalau value lain tu macam biasalah, sepatutnya kita bundar kepada 33 lah kan. Okay, now sebabkan sample size sahaja, kita bundar ke arah yang lebih besar. Kenapa? Sebab the bigger sample size is better. Dia akan mengurangkan, decrease the error. Alright. So basically itu sahaja untuk proportion.